Hey everybody, welcome to another episode number 47 of the FreeMind podcast. I'm your host, Nate Fochman, and today we have a truly exceptional guest joining us. Please welcome John Fareed, the global chairman of Harworth HTL and the author of From Invisible to Icon, now available, the re-release, available dropping today, April 30th. Get on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, get out there, buy those books up, all right? Let's jump in here and check out John's story. So let's diving in strictly to the book then, and I'll shoot from the hip there as far as that goes. So right there from diving into the book, what was the precipice for actually putting it into book? A lot of people have been through similar experiences or other experiences, and it's the next level when you say, I want to put this on pen to paper and I want to share my story with the world. Kind of what was the moment when you decided to make that transition?
So for me, I felt like the book would be cathartic for me personally. But then as I got into the book, I felt like I could really bring some value to individuals who are seeking to achieve more success in their industry. And I also felt like if I told my story, maybe they wouldn't think everybody is so linear in their careers in order to achieve some success in their industry and careers, because mine was far from normal.
One thing that just really got me with your book, and I really wanted to share, was the actionable steps that existed. And for someone that gets in it and they're like, oh, I don't want to read another book about somebody's story of their life, and really for them to understand it's not all about your life. You set the context and you set the tone foundationally, but really it's very much something that anyone can adapt to their life the more you read through the book. And not to give anything away, but I think if anybody's in a questionable situation as to whether or not they want to build their own personal brand, or if they're inside of a business looking to stand out and make themselves more stickable, this book is just a phenomenal option for those types of people.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the writing, and I've already enjoyed the pre, I would say, reviews on the book have been really, really strong. But, you know, one of the things that people need to understand is that personal branding is really the crafting and management of your identity so that it stimulates precise and, I would say, meaningful perceptions about who you are and what you stand for and what you do. Most people don't think about it. In fact, everybody pretty much, if you have any goals or dreams in your life, already has a personal brand. They just may not be managing it to its full value.
With your situation, as far as, and not situation, but as far as your specific story, and going with being a first generation, and then going with the Marines and going with your history and magic, it's such a beautifully winding path. Like, talk about how along the way, as I read the book, it was along the way you were just grabbing the best of each world, and you were really creating and yourself into like this superpower as the pages went on. And talk a little bit about that. Was that a conscious decision at each phase, or was it a later and circling back?
You know what? I'm happy to share my personal brand story with you, Nate. So yes, I'm first generation American on my mother's side of the family. My grandfather was a fighter pilot in the RAF. He worked his way up to brigadier general and later became an ambassador from the Arab League to Japan and then to the UN. And he finished his life in hospitality and travel. Funny enough, he opened the Nile Hilton in 1958 with Conrad Hilton, and essentially headed up their small but important Middle East division for Hilton, but finished his career in travel as head of PR for Egypt Airlines. I think it's important for people to understand that back in those days, well-heeled Egyptians essentially sent their sons and daughters to university in Europe or the US. And my grandfather, a lifelong Rotarian, secured a Rotary scholarship for my mom to come here in the US to go to school. But upon arrival, unchaperoned for the first time in her life, she met the school's 6'4", blonde-headed, blue-eyed basketball star from Alabama, and boom, I was conceived. So needless to say, my devout Muslim grandfather more or less kind of disowned my mom, and said, don't come home and don't write and don't call, but emotionally and I would say financially kind of disowned her. But he'd had two daughters. I was the firstborn male, and I carried his name for Reed. So I spent my summers, many of them, growing up in Egypt and being treated like a prince, quite honestly. But my mom would remain sequestered in the back bedroom, just secluded where only the women could visit her. And I'd rarely get to spend time with her until we were headed to the airport to fly home. During the school year, we lived in North Georgia and spent a lot of time on food stamps and welfare. It was a struggle. But during the summer before my senior year, over a quiet lunch, my grandfather asked me, "So where are you going to university?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm not going to university. I am going to be a magician," which you can imagine was a great response from the general ambassador. And he said, "No, that's unacceptable. If you're not going to go to university, you have to serve in the military, like me and my father and my grandfather before me." And quite honestly, over those summers, my grandfather had carried me to business meetings and lunches and dinners and shopping, of course, and he taught me much. He taught me how to shop for a men's suit and shoes or a gentleman's timepiece, or and some business acumen, like the importance of building and maintaining long-term relationships, or negotiating skills, the concept of honor and faith. So I looked at him and I thought about all this, and I said, "Look, you're asking something very big of me. We don't have to go in the military in the U.S. like you do here in Egypt. It's not mandatory. And I need to ask something very big of you in return, or you're not going to respect me as a man," based on his concepts. And I'm telling you, if he was here with us, Nate, he would tell you he thought I was going to ask for a car for sure. And he was ready to write that check. But I said, "I will happily go into the military if you agree to take mom back fully and completely." And he got mad a little bit. He slammed his hand on the table. He walked out on the lanai, and I watched him light a cigarette and pour a whiskey, a rare thing, especially in the middle of the day. But he came back, sat down at the table, and he looked at me, and 20 minutes in silence, he stared at me and eventually said, "Okay, but it has to be the Marines." And I said, "Okay." And we shook on it. What did I know? But the next day, he took my mom back. He knocked on her bedroom door and said, "Mervet," her name was Mervet, "come join us for breakfast." And she joined us a little sheepishly. And he told her that Granny, my Granny Lulu, was going to take her shopping for a dress and to the salon, and we were going to have lunch with the whole family at the country club. And she looked at me and she said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I'm going to the Marines, Mom." But it was kind of funny, I guess, at the time. Needless to say, she wasn't thrilled about it. But that day at the Gezira Country Club in Egypt was a great day with the whole family. And it opened a door. And eventually my grandparents moved to North Georgia to be close to us. And for the rest of their years, my mom and my grandfather were besties. I mean, they were pretty tight. So it was worth it. But I did keep my promise. I went in the Marines for 6 years. And when I got out, I chased my magic dreams. And I spent 15 years performing in casinos, on cruise ships, and at clubs like the Magic Castle in Hollywood. And then after, I would say when I hit my mid-30s, Nate, I really came to the realization, I mean, this was no master plan, that I had no home, no car, no dog, no long-term relationship worth speaking about. I had no kids. So I made the natural pivot to hotel consulting. It was the only thing that I really understood. And that's basically what the book's about, is my journey from Marine to magician to internationally recognized hotel consultant without having worked in the industry, say for Magic Boy, and without the benefit of college education. And then it goes on to share the personal branding insights and strategies and tactics that I learned over the last 30 years. I have to tell you that part of it was a little bit overwhelming, in that even though I had chosen the hospitality industry, because like I said, it's the only thing that I really knew besides magic, having traveled for most of my life. I realized that I was 15 years behind everybody else in the industry, give or take. And I had to think about the brand that was my consulting brand, the same type of strategy and long-term planning that I had used to succeed in magic, such as really getting involved in professional associations, such as, well, instead of the Society of American Magicians or the International Brotherhood of Magicians, it was the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. I got involved in 95, so going back some years, but I became an active member, committees, board, and worked my way up to global chairman of HSMI's International Foundation. I was then invited to join the prestigious International Society of Hospitality Consultants. And again, it was get involved, committees, board, and I became global chair of ISHC. I worked diligently to acquire industry recognized designations, certifications, awards. And I also wrote a lot. And this is something I know you understand. I wrote a lot for the trade, but instead of Magic Magazine and The Illusionist, it was Hotels, Global Magazine, or Hotel News Now online. Started speaking at conferences. And then at some point, I even decided to go secure a couple of degrees. So I earned 2 postgrads, including a Master of Science in Dublin, Ireland. And that's my story. And today, again, I'm proud to share that I'm worked my way up through the industry to become global chairman of one of the world's largest hotel tourism and leisure consultancies, or with HTL. But I'm still learning. I don't have all the answers, and I still have miles to go before I'm going to achieve my long-term brand goals. But I've learned a lot, and I have much to share on the topic. And that's really what drove me to write the book, was that sharing.
I think that one of the greatest things about your sharing your story, specifically in the way that you have it structured in the book, are 2 things. One is the authenticity of what you wrote, and how it's actually interesting from my perspective as the reader. This is not obviously the first release. This is a re-release, and you do talk about, as well as a lot of people right now, we're coming into a reflection point of how authenticity and genuine interactions, how we've interpreted them now versus, let's say, when this book was released the first time. Talk a little bit about kind of what's changed in your life as well as societally that's kind of allowed you the opportunity for the re-release.
Sure. I think that's a really good point on your part, Nate, in that the first, I would say, iteration of the book was written about 11 years ago. And it really was lesser about story and more about just practical tips on personal branding. This time there's a lot more information. There's new chapters, but there's also a reflection on how society has changed post-COVID and how we're dealing with that and what's going on geopolitically around the world and how we all deal with that, the importance of relationships. And I talk about my pivot. When I first wrote that book, I was kind of a solo practitioner, had a consulting firm called, John Fareed Consulting, essentially. And it was another pivot after COVID. People can work from home more, people could travel more, and kind of the pleasure thing was happening. But I also decided to make a pivot to join Horwath because I could only get so far with my own name as a brand. It was hard to compete with the McKinseys and PwCs and Deloitte's and CBREs and JLL in the real estate space. So becoming part of a global brand with Horwath was key for me. And I talk about that pivot in the book. So that's a new section too. Because really the book was great for a solo practitioner, but now I think it's good for anybody in any industry at any level. Even for, apparently, college students are picking it up right now. So that's a good thing.
And that's a great point as well, with the college students as well as anyone at any level. I think from looking at it as well, there's a aspect where anybody that looks at this book and says, "Oh, I can't afford to have a personal brand. I can't afford to be a global icon." the way that it's presented and the way that it's shown is the reality of it is that it starts with simple steps and it starts with simple actions. And without giving the exacts of the story, and I want people to buy the book to be able to hear this story, but there's certain stories where it didn't involve some giant contract or some giant deal. You had massive pivots in your life simply because of being yourself and being out there and being a presence in the community and being a presence in the world. And I think that that's my biggest takeaway is you don't have to have $1 million to make your own brand. You don't have to have $500 to make your own brand. Just being present and being genuine out in the world is the first step in building your brand.
It's true. And you know, this is really, really important to think about today. It's not something that costs you money necessarily, because we now live in what I call, it's commonly called the knowledge-based economy. I mean, think about how quickly we make decisions about one another based on our own personal experiences and observations about people and society in general. I think, and you know, it's tough to say, but we all make judgments. You're standing in line at Starbucks, or you're at the airport, or even online having conversations with people. And I think it's very important that to be of value, you really need to start thinking about how you craft your personal brand, how you carry yourself, because we're back to, you have a personal brand today. It's just whether you realize it or not. Are you managing it to its greatest potential? And not just at work. It's not just about your professional life. It's about your family. How are you positioned with your family? Are you staying true to your own values and the personal brand that you want to project to your kids and your spouse or your partner? It's also about your friends and your colleagues at work and your clients. It's the full scope. And if you don't think about all of those things, you're missing out. And it has to be, I think, the reason why it doesn't cost any money necessarily is it should be built around your own personal values, your set of values, not somebody else's, and your own attributes. We're all different people. We all have different attributes. You know, if you think about age, sex, sexual preference, where you grew up, nationality, languages that you have, as well as what you do, yes, from an occupation standpoint, but also from a social and civic standpoint, what you do and your hobbies. You play golf or pickleball or teach your kids baseball or basketball. You know, it's all of that. But essentially, it comes down to that core idea, I would say, that comes in terms of who you are, your personal value systems, and the things that you want to communicate with your marketing messages. I hate to say that, but essentially it is marketing. You know, Nate, one of the things that is important to remember, there's three types of branding. There's corporate branding, which people get tied up into when we start talking about personal or product and services branding. But personal branding is pretty much the same thing and follows the same kind of process. And that's what we talk about in the book, that you would go through to develop any kind of brand for a corporation or product or service. The principles kind of remain the same. What are your key attributes? What is your brand packaging? How do you package yourself? You know, you think about somebody like Dog the Bounty Hunter and how he packages himself. It's quite unique, but it works for him and his brand. It's not right or wrong. And you could say that about Adele or Carrot Top or The Rock or RuPaul, even RuPaul. You could choose anybody. It's about their personal brand and their values and how they package themselves and how they describe themselves outwardly.
I think that's also an interesting one when you talk about that when you go into the wardrobe and talking about that, is that, you know, you want to be iconic in a sense that even the shape of your silhouette can be unique to someone else. And I think that, you know, sometimes a lot of people joke around about my beard, and I say, well, it is pretty unique, because I had to go through like 4 rounds of photos to get my passport because it was too wide and I was getting lost. So, you know, there's different times where you have to have those, you know, those wherever it is, it's that defining factor of who you are. And it doesn't, and that's why I love the way you put everything, because it makes it approachable for everybody, and it makes it a very universal book, and it's a real book, and it's got real actionable steps that can be built for. And here's, at the end of the day, the worst case scenario is if you execute everything that's on this book, the worst case scenario is you have a higher quality of life. Let's say you don't make $1 million, because not everybody's going to become a millionaire. Let's not, but if you do these steps and you become more present, you get a more satisfaction and you pursue your passions, or you find what you're passionate about through your own job. I think that there's just such an opportunity for people to take reflection and take inventory and decide what makes them what drives them every day. And I think that your book's an awesome example for that, and a roadmap.
Well, Nate, I appreciate that. I think that if nothing else, when they finish the book, if they go through the exercises, they'll know more about themselves genuinely than they did when they started. And I want to be very clear. The book isn't about making money or making you happy, creating happiness in your life. I feel like if you're doing something that you really enjoy, and you're really being open and honest with yourself and following your own value system, the money and happiness is a byproduct of that. It will come. I also want to be very clear that I know I use the word icon, and I'm not there yet. All right. But icon for me means different things to different people. There are some that we can consider a global icon. You think about Oprah or Lady Gaga, or gosh, there's so many to choose from, sports stars, but you can be an icon in any industry. I met a gentleman some weeks ago who's an icon in the florist industry. Like, he's the go-to guy that everybody wants to learn from and read about, and they want his advice. He's a consultant now in the floral industry. And I think that the idea of icon is just to take the emotional picture in your head of where you are now and where you want to get, and think as high as you can. Think iconic. And that's what it is. And you can be an icon in anything. Yes, sports, film, television, music, those are the big ones, right? Politics, those are the big ones. But in any industry, you can create for yourself. Hairdressers, there's iconic hairdressers and makeup people in theater and all kinds of things. And I don't want anybody to get hung up on the idea of icon.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you putting it that way. And one of the things too is also the delicateness that you emphasize throughout is that fine line between arrogance and cockiness and confidence. And I think that knowing what the differences are, and really, I love that you call that out. And also when you're pursuing something you're passionate about and you're good at, it's not arrogance as much as it is information, and it is just informing people that is a skill that you have. And there's a difference in that versus, let's say, the shallow gurus of the world that are out there trying to do things. And I think that's for you, and this book specifically, it is a book of someone that has the receipts to back up the story. They have the receipts to back up this. They didn't go take a course over the weekend and then come back and write a book about their life. And I think that for you, John, that was what was most powerful. Is it's like every actionable step this person's giving, they've done themselves, and I've seen, and they have the receipts.
Well, thank you for that again, Nate. I've enjoyed it. It's been a fun ride. And I'm looking forward to continuing to learning and hopefully getting further on my path to icon, whatever that means to me personally. But I'm enjoying it. I've enjoyed our friendship as well very much, Nate. I think much of you and all that you've accomplished and the life that you've created for yourself with FreeMind.
Well, it's been a winding roller coaster, just like yours. So talk a little bit about rollout. I see online you have some Barnes and Nobles things coming up, so people can in certain areas they can get out and meet you and do some book signings and some readings and stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited. So there's a few things going on. We're having a launch event. I'm doing a launch event in Coral Gables. It's at a shock and awe. It's at a hotel investment conference where we take the Caribbean Hotel and Resort Investment Summit, which is one conference, and HOLA, which is Hospitality Opportunities Latin America. And there's a combined afternoon evening of those. And I'm closing that with a keynote on the power of personal branding, and there'll be book signings and all of that. So I'm excited about that. But shortly thereafter, on May the 5th, I'm in Orlando. signing at the Barnes & Noble in Colonial Plaza. It's going well so far. I'm excited about that. Followed by, I think on May the 11th, it is May the 11th, I'm in Honolulu at the Barnes & Noble store at Ala Moana shopping center. And then on June 5th, I'm at the Barnes & Noble on Fifth Avenue in New York for another author signing around lunchtime. So hopefully some people will wander over. But I'm excited. There's a lot going on. We've got a lot of releases and obviously podcasts and interviews and radio interviews. We're doing next week the Persuaders out of Ireland, Dublin, Ireland, on Dublin FM. So I'm excited about that. Some others. But yeah, it's a big push. I'm excited.
Awesome. Perfect, John. Well, hey, I'm gonna actually put you in touch with a friend of mine, Brad Axelrod, who does podcast bookings and things like that. I'll send you over an email here later today and connect you guys as well. He might have some people as well that might be interested in connecting and helping you expand and spread the word out for you.
Thanks, Nate. I really, really appreciate it.
And I want to make sure that everybody gets out and buys that book. And I'm going to be buying a copy too, because I have annotated the hell out of your copy. So I can tell you that this is full of all actionable steps. If nobody believed it, they are here. These are actionable steps.
You're a good man.
I tell you. Yeah. So I'm not, all joking aside, those are real notes. And they're not notes of any misspellings or anything like that. Those are things that impacted me, as well as pulled out, and things that I'm going to be taking with me. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for putting yourself into this book and not just sending out another textbook. And that's the piece that I really appreciate.
Thanks, Nate. I have to say, I noticed some of your highlights on a photo that you sent to me in preparation for this on the table, and I thought the one with the chutzpah muscle made me laugh. That was one that you circled, but there's some good stuff in that book that I really enjoyed it. I mean, I spent years putting it together, so I'm so happy that you're getting value out of it. Warms my heart.
Absolutely. It'll start with me and many more after that. That's for sure. So, John, you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you here later today with some emails and connecting some more people to you.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate you. Cheers.
Take care, John.